without further ado, I will turn it over to her. Thank you so much.
So question, when did you start doing forensics? What year?
Personally, what year?
I'm going to out myself
all
and say
right.
I've been doing it 50 years
I
now,
would
1969.
say 1969.
We are both
my
50-year-old graduates of
tournament.
forensics. And
When I was in middle school.
doesn't matter. So was I.
Hate to admit it, yes.
But yeah, so
Time's
forensics
gone fast.
is the name that we call for speech and debate. And forensics means of the law. How many of you have heard of CSI or forensic medicine? The reason it's called forensic medicine is because it's for legal purposes. They're trying to determine who did what to whom through autopsies and things like that. Well, we are taking the other side of forensics, which is how to present and communicate in a legal setting, but this is actually broadly applicable across all parts of life. Wherever you end up going in life, being able to communicate is going to help you a lot. So I currently teach at Wharton, which is a big business school up in University of Pennsylvania, and I'm working with people who are 25, 30 years old, and I'm going to tell you today that you guys are going to end up being better speakers than they are because you're starting young, and that's why it's such a great investment. But what I wanted to do is jump right into it. I managed to automatically lose my pen. Here you go. And tell you, here's the 4 types of public speaking that we offer at the CCIU. And this is actually what we do across the United States. There's over 4,000 high schools who compete in forensics. Middle schools, there's probably 1,500. By virtue of you competing this coming spring at the CCIU tournament, you are actually eligible to go to nationals if you wish, and those are going to be in Albuquerque, New Mexico in June. So we did take from Delaware. I currently run the Delaware League as well. We took some kids to nationals who were middle schoolers last year, and that was down in Dallas. This year it's in New Mexico. Next year it's, I believe, in Alabama. But keep that in mind. There's more to this than just that one little tournament. You can go some really interesting places. But let's talk about, and this is how we shorten it, forensics. This is a 6 here, standing for forensics. The 4 general categories are original speaking, then interpretive speaking, I'm just going to call that interp, then debate, and then Congress. So depending on what you're interested in, I actually recommend you try all of these at some point because each type of public speaking is going to improve your skills. How many folks here want to do debate? Let me get a debate count. All right, just about everybody. Great. How many people are interested in original speaking, which is declamation and oratory? Great. Okay, so I got 3 there. How many people are interested in interp, which is prose, poetry, and duo acting? All right, we got 2 there. Duo acting. Okay. And then how about Congress? This is where you write your own bills and you debate them. Or it's actually not called Congress here, it's called discussion. Same general idea. Anybody interested in discussion in this group? Okay, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on discussion. We're going to spend a lot of time on debate. And the way I'm going to do the schedule today is I'm going to start with interp, move to original speaking, then we're going to spend most of our time on debate. And you're actually going to do debating today on the topic. Does anybody know what the topic is for this year? Just yell it out.
The electoral college.
All right. So, anybody understand what the Electoral College's impact is? Yeah.
It's basically, it's really impactful because basically the popular vote doesn't really count since all the state's popular vote, whoever wins that majority, they usually get all of the electoral votes.
Right.
So the electoral college is really important.
Yes, and it caused an issue. It has caused an issue in previous elections, and it's going to cause an issue in 2020. That's why I wanted for you all to become experts in the Electoral College. You don't need to solve the problem, but you need to understand the problem. So we're going to get into that today before we get done. But where I want to start off is on interp. So of the coaches who are here, how many coaches do I have? Okay, there is a handbook that you should have for the CCIU, and all the ballots are in that handbook. and the ballots, there are two types, and this is for you guys as well. This is the critique sheet that you get back from your judges. And they tell you about whether you had a good selection. This is for the interp. Was your poetry or prose good? Did you understand it? Did you use different voices? Did you have some action that supported it? And what was the overall effect? The other piece of this that is how we run the tournament is the master ballot. So a judge fills out an individual critique sheet for each of you, and then at the end they rank everybody. This is not a rating-based system. Many people get that confused, but there will be a definite rank, and they have to rank you here as well as indicate on the ballot what the rank is. So this will give you all the rules. If you have any questions about, wait a minute, how long is prose and poetry supposed to be? It's here on this. Okay, so let's start with prose and poetry. And what I'm going to do is actually show you a video. I'm actually going to start with what I consider the most fun event in all of forensics land, and that is duo interp. Let me see if I can get the TV to turn on. So let me explain what duo is. For all of the interp events, they are 5 to 7 minutes long. That's the timeline. Now, when I say 5 to 7, you can be 30 seconds over or under, and it will not impact you. But if you are more than 30 seconds over and under, you cannot be ranked first in that round. So it's important to pay attention to time. A 2-minute duo isn't going to help you very much, because the other person comes in with a 5-minute duo, they're probably going to win the round. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, in your experience, so it doesn't affect your score if you're 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Does it tend to affect the judges if you're 30 seconds under or 30 seconds over, even if you're within the time?
Keep in mind it's a competition. So if you come in at 4:30 isn't going to be an issue, but if you came in at 3 minutes and another team came in at 5, who's the stronger team? The one who came in at 5. And that's how it's going to affect it. It's not judge bias. It's just they did a better job. They worked harder. They had a better cutting, whatever it was. So try to stick to these time limits as best you can. I mean, there's a fair amount of slop. There's a 3-minute slop here between 4:30 and 7:30. And you're not going to get penalized. The only penalty is if you end up at 4:25, you cannot be ranked first. You could be the best team in the room, but you're going to end up being second in that round. Okay? Yeah.
Do we still have, we used to have that grace period of a minute.
Well, we do. It's 30 seconds on each side.
Oh, it's 30 seconds.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. We're not going to go beyond 30
Okay.
seconds. Otherwise, it becomes very unfair. Yeah.
So would it, if we were, so for example, we ended at 4:30, would that make the judge just like, or like 4:32 or something? But since it was on the lower end, would it like make the judge score you lower or anything?
No. No. There's no impact other than they can't rank you first if you're less than 4:30. But at the same time, to answer the same question he asked was, does it affect the judge's perception? Well, to the extent that you have a competitor who came in at 5 or came in at 7, they probably are a stronger team. The really, really short little teams are the ones who aren't very, very prepared. They didn't do a good job of cutting their piece. So you want to try to go toward the upper end of this. The stronger the speaker, the longer the speaker. Maybe that's the way to remember. Stronger is longer. Shorter is, oh well, I can't think of a poetic word off the top of my head. But let me tell you quickly what the events are in interp. We have, and I'm using the shorthand for these. There's duo acting. I'm about to show you a duo scene, which is between two people, and they act out a scene from a play. It can be also prose. So I had a team who did Harry Potter. Now, how do you do a book this thick in 5 to 7 minutes? You cut it. You pick out the scenes that you want, and you mash it up into your own new story. So they picked a couple pieces from several different chapters and put it together, trash compacted it into, or mashed it up, maybe that's a better word, into a new cutting, which told a story. So that's how you can do duo, and that's, again, either generally prose or it's going to be plays. Now, we also have poetry, and it's the same exact idea. The only difference is you get to have a notebook in your hand. This one's memorized, okay? So you got to learn your lines. For this one, you have a manuscript in your hands. It is very important that the size, so that, can you hold up your book that you've got in front of you? That is about the size of the book. You do not want to have an 8.5 by 11. Why? It's going to flop all over the place, and you're going to spend most of your time trying to hold on to it, and that completely distracts you from what you're trying to do. So you want to keep it in a 5 by 7 binder, or it's 5 by 8 actually, I think is the size of the binder. And it is not memorized, but it needs to be known. You cannot read it word for word. So I was watching through the window, and you all were reading speeches, and that's good for practice, but at the tournament, you do not want to be reading anything. You can refer to it. You can use this as a prop, but you still, at the end of the day, don't want to memorize it. The same thing is true with prose. So with poetry, generally you pick 2 to 3 poems that tie together on a theme. So one of my daughters did T.S. Eliot's Book of Cats. Has anybody ever seen the musical Cats? Okay, so there's a bunch of different poems. She put several of them together. Then the next year, she did Maya Angelou, I Am a Woman. She picked 3 different poems from Maya Angelou and put it together as a program. So you revolve around a theme. You need to think of what the theme is for your prose and your poetry. You will have an introduction in there. You start with usually a teaser, which is maybe 30 seconds of a particular poem. Then you stop and you give them an introduction. And in the introduction, what you're trying to do, and this is true for all of the interp events, in the intro, what you're telling them, number 1 is, what's the theme? Then, who's the author? And what is the name, author or authors? And what are the titles of the pieces? And then you pause, and then you get back into reading the poetry. This is generally about 30 seconds long. But if you don't have an intro, the judge has no idea what things you're reading. They have no idea why you picked this, and they have no idea what they're supposed to walk away with. So you've got to have an intro. That's really important. If you forget to do that, you're going to be feeling sad. All right, so that's true for any of these interp events that you have to have that. For prose, you could pick short stories. How many of you guys in English have studied short stories? Have you had any that you really, really liked? Think of one you really, really liked. Okay.
Harrison Bergeron.
What is it?
Harrison Bergeron.
Okay. That might be a source for having a prose. Now, how long is that short story? If you were to read it out loud, 10, 15 minutes?
Maybe even less.
Okay.
7 minutes.
So you get to cut parts out. Here are the things that you want to cut out in a prose, and it is the he saids, she saids. Get rid of, that's called stage direction. Get rid of that, and instead what you do is you have voices. You come up with a different voice, a different accent for the different characters. You have different body posture. For instance, if I'm a little girl, I might be talking up like this, and then I'm mom and I'm talking down like that. So my focus and my eyes show where I'm looking, and it's basically off campus. So these are called pops, just so you know. And a pop, and you're going to see them on the duo, would be where I don't look at the audience. You're in your own little theater here. When I'm mom, I'm talking down like this, and when I'm the little girl, I'm up like that. I didn't move. I'm still standing exactly where I was, but you know immediately when I'm mom, I'm talking deep, and when I'm a little girl, I'm talking high. But my eyes have shifted, my body posture has shifted, and we have some more people coming in. Here we go. Why don't we pause for just a minute and let these folks get settled? So that just gives you a little bit of background. What we started talking about is interp. These guys have already heard the spiel, but there are 3 basic types of interp events that we offer at CCIU. This year we are not going to do original poetry. There are just not enough kids who signed up for it, but we are going to have a poetry slam where they're going to get to present their poetry in front of the entire group. So if you want to do original poetry, you may do that in addition to doing another event. But there's duo acting, which is where 2 people act out a scene. There's poetry, where you have a selection of different poems that you put together with a general theme that ties together. And I think this is about when you guys walked in. Of my 3 daughters, one did poetry when she was in the 8th and 9th grade. Actually, she started in the 6th grade. So one year she did Rum Tum Tugger, the T.S. Eliot book of cats, and she had 3 different T.S. Eliot poems she pulled together. And the theme was talking about cats, because she happened to like cats. You have to also give in, after you have your teaser, which is generally about 10, 15 seconds, you have to provide an intro, which is generally about 30 seconds. You tell them what the theme is, who the author is, and what the titles are. Very important. If you leave that out, then the judge has absolutely no idea what you're up to. So that's poetry. And then prose is doing the same thing. You have a book, and I'm sorry I have to repeat this for you guys, but for you guys, you have a book. Could you hold up your little thingamabob again? A little 5 by 8.5 binder is what you want. Do not get the big 8.5 by 11 binders, which are the size of this, because this flops around and it becomes very distracting. You want it small, which is essentially that, half that. So, and you can actually get those binders on the NSDA website. But same thing with prose and poetry. You have that in your hand. It is not memorized, but at the same time, you're not reading it word for word. You are interpreting it. It's there to help you, but it is not to replace you actually doing the work. For duo, it is memorized. So I'll put an M here, meaning that it's memorized. Okay, what I want to do at this point is, somehow we lost the signal. Let me see here. I want to play a duo so you get an idea, at least part of one. All right, here we go. So this year, one of my duos is doing Little Shop of Horrors. Now, this is not them. This comes back to 2015. And let me just pause this for a sec and see if we can get the volume on. And make this bigger.
In the bottom left corner, the bottom left is the last line through it.
What?
Like on to the right, like not all the way to the right, sorry. Where the time is.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Such enemies often do.
Thank you. The problem is I have 2 volumes.
The month of September, and an early year of a decade not too long ago, the human race suddenly encountered deadly threat to its very existence, and this terrifying enemy surfaced, as such enemies often do, in the seemingly most innocent and unlikely of places.
This is the intro.
High school students who partake in this activity choose pieces that are synchronized all streamers. Funny, dramatic, I'm not crazy, don't call me crazy, edgy. And lastly, musicals.
Well, Mason, that is extraordinarily funny because I have the perfect piece. I will. It involves a user stock boy, a Dixie beyond almost, and finally, a giant alien planet.
Space for the sole purpose of manipulating everyone into getting what she wants and finally eating all of them. Okay. That sounds wild. Little Shop of Horrors.
By Howard Ashman.
Notice how much acting they're doing without saying a word.
Look at that. Fix the plot that we haven't solved so much thus far. Seymour! Seymour, what's going on down there?
Little Mr. Mushnick, I got these plants replenished for you.
Seymour, look what you've done to the inventory. Yeah, look, Seymour, Mr. Bushwick.
Hi there, Audrey. You look very radiant today.
I'll clean it up for the customers get here. Seymour, why don't you run in the back and get that strange and interesting new plant you've been working on?
See, she's playing multiple characters and he's playing multiple characters.
Baby, what? Do you realize how ridiculous you sound? Just because you put a strange and interesting new plant in the window doesn't make people suddenly. Where'd you get it?
Well, Dad, you remember that total eclipse of the sun a few weeks back? Dad, I was walking in the wholesale flower district that day when I came across this old Chinese man. Now, do you sometimes sell you weird and exotic cuttings? You had nothing unusual there that day.
Nope,
And I was about to, walk on by when suddenly, without warning, there was this total eclipse of the sun. Then it got very dark and I heard strange humming sound like from another world. Then when the light came back on, this weird plant was just sitting there.
Oopsie
Then the old Chinese man sold it to me for $1.95.
Well, put it in the window. I'm going to dinner. Good night, Mr. Bushnick. Goodbye, Seymour. I got a date tonight.
She's doing sound effects behind his back.
You sickly little clan, I just can't stop. Please. Vote for me.
She's pretending to be the plant.
I guess a few drops couldn't hurt as long as you don't make a habit of it or anything. Hey,
And let's begin the interview with Seymour Krelhorn, the young botanical. Do you mind if I call you a genius?
gosh, no.
The genius who has developed a new breed of plant life hitherto unknown on this planet, the Oratory. Just one last question, Mr. Krelhorn. Do you need anything special?
Special. No, it's a secret formula, but it's not hard to come by.
I see. Thanks for dropping by.
I'd like to remind our listeners that Oratory is on display exclusively in Bushlick Skid Row floors, open 6 days a week, 10 to 6. How did I do?
That's called a transition, where they're switching into a new scene. Notice the different accents. Also notice they never look at each other. The focus is always off camera. Nor can they touch each other. They come close, but they don't touch.
Let me heal for a few days, okay? Then we can start on the left hand again.
So the plant has gotten much bigger. Originally the plant was little, now it's much bigger.
You talked. You opened up your trap and you said, "Hey, it doesn't have to be a human trophy. Where am I supposed to get a trophy? A sheeple? Feed me alone. I can feed a sheeple. I know a big and strong. You eat blood, Audrey. What am I supposed to do? Kill people? I'll make it worth your while.
See how they're speaking together to make the plant voice really weird?
Christ, when would I
Whoops. Okay, well, you saw enough, I think, at this point. That went a little bit longer in 7. It's about 8:14. Whoops.
Dreams of realizing our potential. To be the first in my family.
Okay. So that it looks very complex, and it does take a lot of practice to pull a duo off, but it's a ton of fun. So if you start working now, and you can pick any play or any book that you want. The main thing is to find a partner that you can get along with and that you will work on. And I would say that within about 3 to 4 weeks, you can have the piece memorized, but then what you're working on is all the technical stuff. We call it the techniques. You saw them flipping around. You saw the arms doing these. They had to invent all of that. This is not a play. You don't have props. You don't have a script or anything like that with you. You've got to invent this in the mind of the people watching it. And they all wear debate suits, as it were. So that's duo, and I would say that you could have a lot of fun with that one. The same thing applies for poetry and prose. We're going to take a break at a certain point, and I'm going to see if I can pull up a poetry by a guy called I Love Cake. If I can get to that one, then we'll play that after the break. Are there any questions about interp? So, yeah.
You mentioned the poetry slam for interp as like a side thing in addition
Right.
to doing something.
Right.
Does the poetry slam, is it basically all the interp rules?
It would be, in a poetry slam, there really are no rules. We'll probably keep it down to 3 minutes per per poem. It's not a competitive event. So if you have some original poetry you'd like to do, think of about maybe a 3-minute segment. You're just going to come up on the stage and do it, and then the next person would come up and do it.
Oh, so we don't have to memorize it?
No. I mean, if it's your own poetry, it may already be in your head, as it were. Clearly, if you can do a poetry slam without having it in your hand, you're better off. It is better to have it in your brain, not have it here. But we don't require that for these 2 regular events, so if you needed it for the poetry slam, you could do that as well. Yeah?
When is that going to be in the program, the poetry slam?
It's going to be when we're getting ready for finals. Well, finals have completed. We're waiting for awards. Because sometimes debate runs long, and so this is going to be used as entertainment. But I think last year we only had 3 kids who did it, so it's not going to be very long entertainment. We'll leave it at that. Okay, so that's enough for interp. The coaches, and I'll just bring this up for Great Valley as well, the book of all of the ballots and things are here. You can look them up. All right, let's move into original speaking. We do have some folks interested in that. What are the 3 types of original speaking? Anybody know off the top of their head? I mentioned them earlier. Oratory, right. What's another one? Declamation. And actually, this is OO, and this is called DEC. And then the last one is impromptu. Okay, so we're going to actually, and that's called IMP. Let me talk about these. Time limits, again, are 5 to 7 minutes for these 2. And this one, impromptu, is 3 to 4 minutes. It's a little bit different. So let's talk oratory first. Is there an eraser around here? Ah, magic box. So does anybody have an oratory they're thinking of doing? Do we have any orators? Got a couple. Okay, excellent. Tell me a little bit about the topics that you guys are talking about. Just yell them out to me and I'll write them down. What is it?
We did Windows.
Windows? What type of windows?
Just like in general.
Windows. All right.
Oranges.
Oranges. Okay. What's the topic? Let me put down one thing here for oratory. In oratory, you need to have something called a call to action. You are persuading people. That means you are wanting them to do something. So just talking about oranges, this falls maybe into the world of after dinner speaking, which is called AD, or it could be an impromptu. But for an oratory, you would need to have like everybody should have windows on their house or something. That's not a very good one. Does anybody have a more action-oriented oratory topic they're thinking about?
You get windows from Windows Empire.
Okay.
Yeah, this is we're persuading people to get windows from the company Windows Empire.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Windows Nation. No, Windows Nation.
Forget about it. I'm not going to write it up there. Anybody else? Any other oratories? Can you say it again?
Intersectional feminism.
Okay, what's the topic? What are you advocating for? Okay, I only can hear the first thing you're saying. You said intersectional what?
Intersectional feminism.
Feminism. Is good, bad, or indifferent?
It's good.
Okay. So that's getting a little closer to what you want. On oratory, we no longer require an umbrella topic. You can talk on anything you want. But the topic that you have should have a should in it. And it needs to have an action statement in it, which is that call to action I was talking about there. Now, the way that you organize oratory is you have different structures. The first thing you do is you figure out what's your topic. What are you advocating for? Oratory is advocacy. So you need to keep that in mind, that I'm advocating for some change. After you figure that out, then you figure out how do I want to organize it. Generally, you do it in threes. Has anybody seen the GMC ad for the rule of threes? This goes back to Aristotle. This is very, very, very old, 2,500 years of talking about it. We think in terms of threes. So when you organize any speech, whether it is an impromptu, a deck not so much because somebody else wrote it, but they would have already done that, or oratory, think about what are the three main reasons we should do that. Now think about, this goes to English 101. Some of the common types of outlines that you would use in a term paper are past, present, future, right? One that you see very often in oratory is what is the problem? Why is the problem? So this is what, why, and what's the solution? That's very common. Another one, a permutation on that theme would be what is the problem, what's the solution, and what are the benefits? Has anybody ever written a paper? Did you use any of these type of outlines? Thank you. That's all you need to do for oratory. The one that I actually recommend is the strongest is you have an intro and you have a conclusion, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and then you have the body of the speech, which is those 1, 2, and 3s. In this intro, you can set the problem up here. For instance, death penalty ought to be abolished. That's my topic. The problem is death penalty does not work. It is not a deterrent. But I'm going to advocate that death penalty should be abolished for 3 reasons. It's no deterrent, it is expensive, and ultimately it is unethical. So you set the problem up here, and then you explain 3 independent reasons why they ought to go along with what you're advocating. Now, death penalty is a good example of something that's very controversial. Depending on where you live in the United States, some people are very much in favor of death penalty. Around here, probably not so much. You don't want to pick a topic that everybody already agrees with you on. If this is what I call a no-duh topic, don't do it. It's not controversial. And the judge is going to listen to you and then listen to your competitor who gets up there and advocates for something that is controversial. The competitor is going to win. So if you do what I call, I can't write on this, remind me of that. If you do what we call the no-duh type of topic, it is really an informative, it is not a persuasive. Let me explain about the difference between informatives and persuasives. Informatives do not have a call to action. It is a lecture. You are getting up and teaching someone about something. Tennis is the best sport. Is that informative or is that persuasive? Persuasive. Tennis is a sport. Is that informative or persuasive? That's informative, right, because I took the call to action out. So this should terminology needs to be in there. If it's informative, you are going to fall to the bottom of the round. You will not be able to win because you're not persuading people, you're just teaching people. So try to keep the teaching out of it. Here's the problem. People love to teach. Informatives are fun to do. You get up there and you, just like I'm doing right now, I get to tell you all this wonderful stuff and you think, boy, this is really cool. But you don't have to do anything with what I'm suggesting. That's why we force people to take one step up. And let me explain how we differentiate it right up here in the intro. And this is going to help you in English 101. So the first thing you do is you pick your topic. Make sure it's controversial. It has an advocacy position. The second thing you do is figure out what are the 3 main reasons somebody should agree with me. The third thing you do is get your intro and conclusion figured out. So here are the main elements. This is what I call my two-handed recipe for how you write any speech, whether it's oratory, impromptu, or deck, or whatever. The first thing you have is what we call an AGD. That stands for Attention-Getting Device. You need to memorize this because this is how you're going to get through college essays and everything else in years to come. An attention-getting device can be a story, it can be a song lyric, it can be just an example from a TV show or a movie. There's all sorts of things. It can be a quote. I generally used quotations, like from Mark Twain. It can be a startling statistic. 6 million people are going to lose their right to vote in the upcoming election. You're like, why? Because of the Electoral College. So what I start off with is a quote, a stat, a song lyric, like I said, or a story, very short story, for the AGD. What I do not do is stand up here and say, my topic is why we should get rid of the Electoral College. Don't do that. That is going to be the speaker who ends up last place. You never start with a topic, and you never start with your name. Hi, my name is Sue Hayes. Why not? Because for the first 5 seconds, no one is paying attention to you. And if they miss your name and they miss your topic, you are going to lose the round. And this is true in life in general. When you have an interview with someone, you do not start off with, hi, my name is Sue Hayes. You start off with maybe a story to answer a question preemptively. And then the second step, well, let me finish giving this. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. We will get to the name in just a minute. The second step is tie it into the topic. The farther backward you look, the farther forward you're likely to see. When we take a look at the history of NATO, it is clear that NATO needs to continue to exist. So I started off with a quote. The farther backward you look, the farther forward you're likely to see. Then I tied into the topic, which I just pulled out of the air, which was NATO. Then the next thing I want to do is what we call the statement of significance. This is the big so what. I need to get you to understand, if I'm talking to you, why do you want to listen to a speech on NATO? When we take a look at what's going on at NATO right now, with President Trump talking to the various leaders of the EU, it is clear that if NATO ceases to exist, as he is basically advocating for, it's going to have dramatic consequences. So I'm setting up the big so what. Why do we need to think about NATO? Because Trump's about to deep six it. And that would be devastating. The fourth thing you do is the ID, which is where you give your name, and you can basically give your name and why you're speaking on this. The farther backward you look, the farther forward you're likely to see. When it comes to understanding the future for NATO, it is clear we need to look to the history of why it was formed in order to understand why it is so critical that it not be dismantled under Trump. My name is Sue Hayes. I'm a concerned voter. And I have seen the impact of NATO in protecting the security of the world over the last 10 years. So I've given you my name and why I care about this. This is the ethos. When we talk about speech, there's 3 key areas. There's logos, which is logic. There's ethos, which is ethics or your credibility. And then the final thing is pathos. Pathos, like empathy, sympathy, that means the passion. So the logos is the brain, the ethos is the whole person, and then the pathos is the heart. You need to have all 3 pieces in order to be an effective speaker. But I established my ethos right here. Then the next thing you've got to have is the roadmap, okay, and the call to action. And I've already talked about the call to action. So in order to understand why we need to continue NATO for the foreseeable future, we're going to take a look at 3 consequences of eliminating it. Russian aggression, Chinese aggression, and the war on terror. I'm making this up. But you need to give them the roadmap, and that roadmap is those 3 points that we just laid out. I could say, in order to understand this, we need to look at the past of NATO, what the present situation is, and where the future lies. That would be my roadmap. You must enunciate your roadmap. It is not sufficient to keep it in your noodle. If the judge does not know where you're going, they are going to tune out. They'll say, all right, well, how many of you have heard speakers who just sort of wander in the wilderness? And at the end of the day, where the hell are they going? What's going on? And what happens when people do that? Pick up your phone and start playing with it. You must have a roadmap. And you must tell them what the call to action is. We need to keep NATO. That's my call to action. I'm not telling you, you guys need to fly over to Europe right now, to Brussels, and you need to make sure that they keep NATO. I'm not asking you to personally do it. I'm advocating what has to happen on a policy level. Okay? Now, you can do oratories, what I call fluff and unicorns, if you want to talk about why people should be nice to each other. Sort of a boring topic, but some people want to talk about it. The call to action would be nice to your friends, right? So you can have all sorts of different types of topics. I prefer the ones that are policy topics, which are looking at the universe, the broader universe. Why? Even though it may not appeal to other middle schoolers, there's only one person in that round who matters. And who is that? The judge. How old is the judge? Older than you, for sure. The judge is way beyond unicorns and candy corn. They don't care about that anymore. They are concerned about NATO. You need to think about a topic that you're interested in, but that they are also interested in. So no more marshmallow fluff. Not that you guys have ever done that, but I've seen plenty of it on the high school circuit. So do you understand the pieces of the intro? It's basically 5 with the 6th finger is the call to action. You can switch these 2 around. In order to understand why we need to keep NATO, which is the call to action, I'm going to look at 3 things. Or we can just say we're going to look at 3 things in order to understand why we should keep NATO. It doesn't matter the order of these 2. The rest of these, it does matter. They should be in this order. Okay? Now, this is what you're going to do for impromptu also. So anybody who's interested in impromptu, you've just been taught how to do intros. What do you do for conclusion? Does this sound like English 101? Have you been taught how to do intros? Yeah, okay, good. If you hadn't, I'd have bigger concerns. For the conclusion, you basically invert the triangle, but all you have to do for the conclusion is go back over. You can restate the roadmap if you want. Today we've looked at 3 reasons why we ought to keep NATO. I generally do not repeat the reasons, but if you want to, you can. I repeat the call to action. And then the last thing I do is tie in with the AGD, which is my punchline. Okay? Does this sound like English 101? Yep. So this is a punchline, and this is where you're going to win the round. The last 10 words you say is what's going to win you first place. Believe me. Yeah, somebody had a question over here.
Should we have a thesis, or is that more of like...
Yeah, that's the topic.
So it should be in like a thesis format, or like...
Just say the topic, in order to understand why NATO should be preserved. You state it however you want. Let me take a step back. How do you do a thesis statement?
Well, you, I don't know, put like your...
Say,
You write what your argument is, and or...
no, you don't have time for that. The statement has to be like 10 words. So the topic should be keep it to around 10 words. The thesis statement, as you're defining it, is this whole thing. This is your thesis statement right here, the intro. To the extent that you can draw an analogy between what you're learning in English 101 and this, that's good. But still, at the end of the day, this is the flow that you want when you're doing an oral presentation. It might be slightly different in a written presentation. One thing I would point out, in oratory, you do write the speech out and you do memorize it, 5 to 7 minutes. The place that most people fail in oratory is when you memorize things, your voice gets very flat because you're trying to remember the script on the inside of your head. and you lose the conversational tone of voice. You're more concerned about, oh, I have to say every word exactly as I wrote it down. And that turns people off. The ones who win oratory are the ones who have memorized it but then proceeded to unmemorize it and learn how to give a speech conversationally in their normal tone of voice. Think about when you talk, your voice goes up and down and up and down and up and down. When you become monotone, it's like reading a bedtime story. And by the way, that's the other reason I said don't read your prose and poetry, because when we do bedtime stories, what's the objective of a bedtime story? Put you to sleep. What's the best way to do that? Da 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 da. Don't act out the action. That'll get the kid jumping up and down in the bed. You bore people to death. That's how you do any type of when you do a when you read something, but when you memorize something, you tend to do the same thing. So coaches, the thing to worry about is after they've memorized it, get them back into a conversational tone of voice. Which means that it may not be word for word the same. I don't care. The exact wording is not, nobody has that speech in front of them reading it while you're doing it. You're not getting graded on that. You're getting graded on whether you persuade. What's the benefit of writing it out in advance? Well, you get to come up with some really good phraseology that you like. You come up with some great language. But beyond that, those are sound bites. The thing that you have to memorize is your outline. What are the 3 things I'm trying to do? What are the 3 tags I have? What is the evidence that I'm presenting? And we're going to get into that in just a sec. But anyway, this is the intro. The one thing I do suggest that you get this down really solid is your intro. Make sure you know the first 2 sentences and make sure you know the last sentence that you have. If you do not practice those, and you have to practice them out loud, anything you practice in your head is never going to come out your mouth that way. Here's how you practice, just so you know, and this is something for the impromptu guys as well. When you practice, find a corner and talk here, and what happens is the sound reflects back into your ears. This is how we remember things. We are a storytelling race. We remember what we hear. We do not remember what we read. So when you practice, I want you to do it in a corner or in a shower stall or in the car, anywhere where your voice can reflect back and you will remember what you're saying. That is the magic trick for learning how to memorize something. And you also are changing your soundbite. But again, if it comes out slightly differently, it's okay. That's fine. All right, so we've got this part down. Let me talk quickly about the body of the speech again. We came up with our 3 main points, but you got to have more than that. That's not sufficient to get through 5 minutes worth of material. So, in the body of the speech, remember we had 3 main points. I'm just going to do past, present, future for grins because I have it off the top of my head. And we'll stick with Noduh for the moment. The best outlines are what we call 3/2s, which means you have 3 main points and 2 subpoints. That's the strongest organization you can have. So for under past, we might want to look at, and I'm going to keep Noduh here, this is World War II, might be where I start, and the next thing is from 1950 to 1990, whatever. I look at the past of Noduh. Now, under there, I have evidence to support this. And oh, by the way, this is exactly how you're going to organize your debate cases, too. So all you debaters, don't think you're off the hook. This is exactly how you have to do it. So I'm going to have facts and figures to support this. It can be quotes. It can be statistics. It can be charts and graphs, although you can't show charts and graphs. You'd have to describe them. But you have evidence to support this. And the reason that's important is you guys are middle school students, and I say this even to the high school students and to the Wharton kids. Nobody knows who you are. You are not an expert in Noduh. You don't know diddly crap. But you did your homework. And you went and you found General Schwarzkopf made a comment about Noduh 15 years ago. Okay, you quote Schwarzkopf. I believe Schwarzkopf. I know who he is. So make sure that you get to express what's important to you through what you're talking about, but at the end of the day, you have to have corroborating evidence from experts to support this. Expert testimony. This is exactly what lawyers do. Lawyers have their own opinion, but they don't tell you what their opinion is. They have to defend O.J. Simpson even though they think he's guilty of sin, because that's their job. So how do they do that? They don't get up and say, well, I think O.J. is guilty, or I think O.J. Does anybody know who O.J. Simpson is? Thank God, I haven't gotten too old yet. Okay, so my opinion is his lawyer is irrelevant. The only thing that's relevant is the evidence. If the glove don't fit, he don't sit, or whatever the thing was. So they use evidence to support the position that they have to advocate for. Debaters, you have to advocate on both sides. So whether you like the Electoral College or not, irrelevant. You have to advocate both for it and against it if you're coming from the South. Therefore, your own personal opinion, out the door. Your mother's opinion, out the door. We don't care. I, as a judge, only want to hear the evidence. And it's the same thing true in oratory and impromptu. This is not about personal opinion. Okay, so under the present situation, we could talk about what Trump is up to. He's basically cutting the funding, and then we can talk about all the other EU nations and all the other NATO nations. Perhaps that's the way I want to organize that. Yeah.
When you say expert testimony, this is for debate. If you use an expert's opinion, could that, like if you say that if someone really well versed in the Electoral College, if we use a code that had their opinion, would that be recommended?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm about to give you, your coaches already have this, 150 pages of expert testimony already done for you. Now, if you're smart, you're going to go get your own expert testimony. Why? Because everybody in the room has the same packet of information. And oh, guess what? They have evidence on both sides. So you quote Schwarzkopf on this page, and then the negative team has a thing saying Schwarzkopf's the biggest idiot that ever ran the US military. So this is not indefensible. It's just saying that you already have, this pump has been primed significantly for you, but don't rely on it. Okay, and so for the future, this is, and again, this is both useful for original speaking and for debate. The future, where you have to land is what are the impacts? What's good, what's bad of this stuff happening? So if I'm advocating for NATO, I'm going to talk about what are the negatives that could occur if there was no NATO? All right, the end of the world as we know it. What would go on if NATO disappeared? I need to explain that. What happens on the positive side if we keep NATO? I need to explain impacts. People do not make decisions unless they understand the impact, positive and negative, for whatever you're advocating for. So does this make sense in terms of original speaking and debate? The critical structure you need, 3 points, the type of evidence that you need to support. Does this all make sense? Okay, good. Then we're going to move on, and we're going to actually do a workshop thing right now. I'm going to take 1 second more to explain. We talked about oratory. Declamation is where you find somebody else's speech. Most speeches are not 5 to 7 minutes long. They're going to be 10 to 20 minutes long. You need to cut them down, okay? So find a speech you would like to do for DEC. It's memorized. Cut it down to 5 to 7 minutes. Impromptu, that's where you're going to be given a topic, and I'm about to hand out some topics, which pile they ended up in. There it is. Okay. And I'm going to split you into 4 tables, and you're going to each come up with an impromptu, and you're going to present it. Now, I don't expect a 3 to 4 minute impromptu. I'd like a 1 minute impromptu. And here's the topics. What normally happens in impromptu is you'll walk in, there's an envelope, and you'll pull 3 topics out. You select one of them, put the other 2 back in the envelope. You then have 2 minutes to prepare a 3 to 4 minute speech. What's the outline you're going to use? Exactly what we were talking about here. 3 independent reasons to support your position. Do you have an intro? Do you have a conclusion? Yep. Impromptu, it is critically important that you practice with your coaches every week. Do them at home. Do them with your parents. I don't care who you do them with. Impromptu requires very quick thinking. You only have 2 minutes to come up with a 4-minute speech. If you think, oh, goody, I'm going to do impromptu because I don't have to do anything. I'm just going to show up that day and do it, you're going to be very sad. You will give a 10-second impromptu, walk out the door, and hang your head and cry. So these are not good. These impromptu topics, in years past, we've picked some fun ones like oranges or windows. My favorite one was finals and nationals in college many years ago, and the topic was peanut butter. It's like, oh great, what do I talk about with peanut butter? So here's what I talked about. With peanut butter, I first talked about I hate peanut butter, because I do. The second thing I talked about is why peanut butter, however, is necessary for school lunch programs. And then the third thing I talked about was world hunger. So for impromptu, generally there's a strategy. You can go from micro to macro or vice versa. Or you can say peanut butter is great for 3 independent reasons. It's fast, cheap, and easy, whatever. You come up with that. The same structure that I just showed you, the different things, past, present, future, all of those structures still work for an impromptu. The trouble is you only have about 10 seconds to figure out what the structure is. And then the rest of the time is how do I want to start this, how do I want to end it, and what do I want to say under each of those main points. You got to do that in 2 minutes. So this requires practice. The same way as trying to teach somebody how to ride a bike. I can give you a book and say, here, read it. You'll learn how to ride a bike. Will you learn how to ride a bike? I bet you'll have a bunch of skin knees. And that's what we're trying to avoid here. So practice impromptu. And it's actually fun. I would recommend this as a team event and make everybody learn how to do impromptu. Because this is what's going to set them up for success in interviews, for summer internships, in talking to college boards, whatever they have to do. Impromptu is probably the best skill you can teach at the end of the day. And it's fun. You can pick topics like peanut butter or the letter A. Okay, now you got 2 minutes to figure out what you want to say about the letter A. Ugh. Automobiles, alignments, and I don't know, assignments. I have no idea. But that's how much time you have to think about this. Bing, bing, bing. Okay? So here's what we're going to do for impromptu. I'm going to hand one out to each table. You get to be the boss of this table, and the first topic is yours. Should the Electoral College be banned? Okay. Well, okay, second bullet is, how will the Democrats fare in the 2020 election? This group is, how will the impeachment proceedings affect the election? And yours is, will a woman ever become president of the United States? Maybe you could help this table over here. All right, here's what I want you to do. I got to talk to you for a moment about notes. For this exercise, you can have them, but keep them no bigger than this. What happens if they're like this? This is what you're doing. You will not win the round if you're staring at your friggin' notes. You will only win by looking at people in the eye. Secondly, you don't need them. You can learn how to do impromptu he did this exactly right. Notice these are 1 to 2 word tags. In the actual competition, no notes are allowed. So you better practice learning how to give speeches without notes. You never want to read anything from this card. And what would make me the happiest is if you had this and you never looked at it. But, because I want you to trust yourselves. You've got this in your noodle. You're smart people. You just talked about it. I know you can remember this for 2 seconds. But if you have to have the security blanket for today, I'll let you have it. But they need to be small. And in general, coaches, if they use notes for anything, they should be no bigger than an iPhone on 1 page. They may not use their iPhone. That's disaster. But this is the biggest note card you will ever be allowed to use, and 50 words is the max you will ever be able to use, or they'll disqualify you. But in impromptu, you may not even have that, or they will disqualify you. So that being said, you may have your notes for this, and we're not going to time it, but we are going to film it, and just go ahead and start. And I'm going to flow. As you're talking, I'm just going to be writing down what you're saying over here, okay?
All right.
So go ahead.
As elections come and go, the power of our parties has swung drastically side to side. The question is, will it swing again in this election? I believe that the power is likely to swing to the Democratic Party in this coming election because of a couple of reasons. These are because of us winning the Democratic Party winning the popular vote in the last election, because of the recent impeachment trials of Donald Trump, and because there are more Democrats in the Congress this year. First of all, the electoral colleges causing the Republicans to win the last election. Us winning the popular vote has shown that we have strong potential to we have the people to win this. And it is important that we can muster the support for any candidate that is nominated. So it is important that we get a strong candidate. Also, with Donald Trump's recent impeachment, there's a lot of controversy surrounding the Republican Party. Many people think that the president should be impeached, but he's also being protected by many of the Republicans in the government. This could cause people to kind of lean away from the Republican Party because they feel like they are either blindly following the president or that they aren't effectively governing our people. Finally, there are more Democrats in Congress. Now this gives us a lot of power because the Congress will help control our nation. And even if we do get a Republican president, that gives us a lot of power to control the nation and to help our people. For these reasons, I think that the Democrats will succeed in the coming election.
Great. So this is what we call flow. And this is what you do when you're debating or when you're judging. You write down the notes of what people are saying. You did a great job. Your intro was good. I think the AGD tie-in could have been a little bit stronger, but you did tie it back to the top. So the punchline, we may want to add a little bit to that. And that only comes with practice. But you did a great job of landing the speech, as it were. Yeah.
I just have a question in terms of the idea of the political conversations that people would have. Would you tell the kids to steer clear from saying like us and we and them?
Yeah.
Conversations?
Yeah, because you sort of show your hand, oh, he's a Democrat. So you want to try to be sensitive and talk to the judge. The royal we is okay if you include the entire organization, audience, but generally try to avoid saying I or you, things like that. But he had 3 strong points. Here's the good thing. Notice, these are the 2-word tags or 1-word tags. That's all you have to put on a note card to practice, is just 1 word. Do not write verbs. My number 1 rule is do not put a verb anywhere. Why? A, you don't need it. You will figure out that verb as you're talking. B, the moment you have a verb, you have a whole sentence. And you don't have time or room on a card for a whole sentence. You only have room for 1 or 2 words. So that was great, and you did have some good substructure underneath each one, and you had some good analysis. So we always look at analysis and evidence. Not a whole lot of evidence, but that's because this was an impromptu off the top of the head. But you could see easily how you could slot a few statistics in there, especially when it came down to the Democrats in the Congress. What is the number of Democrats versus the number of Republicans? What are they expected to go to? The more facts that you sprinkle in here, the more likely you are to win the round. The people with the facts are the ones who are going to win. So just keep that in mind. And when you do impromptu, we will be sticking with the Electoral College general election area for impromptu. So you don't need to practice on peanut butter. It's fun, but you don't need to do it. So you need to become really well versed in what's going on in 2020. That's really the category for impromptu. Excellent job on that. Let's move to the next folks here. And who wants to go next? You guys, up. And what was your topic area?
The Electoral College.
Electoral College,
And
okay.
If it should be disbanded.
Okay. Go ahead.
The Electoral College is one of the most controversial institutions in American history. I see that the Electoral College should be banned. For context to this, the Electoral College was created to settle differences between the large and small states during the constitutional convention. the compromise created the Senate and the House as they are known today. The Electoral College currently sets up terms.
You can look at your notes.
Has the effect of taking power away from the popular vote and blocking it from the democratic ideal of one person per vote. Additionally, the system favors the Republican due to their prominence in small states, and does not get to one person per them. Although the Electoral College has both positives and negatives, I see that it should be disbanded from the reasons above.
Okay, that's it. Very good. So what was your roadmap? Because I didn't quite flow it right. What were your 3 points?
So I was thinking about like the past, present, and future, and thinking about that.
Okay, I think what you ended up with was the history, which is the past, and then the problem statement, and then what the solution, the call to action was. What you might want to think about for a topic like this would be, what are the advantages, those are called ads, and DAs, the disadvantages of doing this. You might want to add that. Remember I talked about impacts? You may want to put the impacts last, because that's the thing people are going to remember and act on, are the impacts. If you're advocating to get rid of Electoral College, then you're going to really stress the advantages of doing that. But you do need to acknowledge the disadvantages, which are called counter-arguments. So if you can take out the opposition's counter-argument preemptively, it improves the chances of you winning. And this is very true in debate. Acknowledge what a counter-argument would be, but then immediately respond to it. And say, opponents might say this, however, boom, and then you just answer it. Now they have nothing to say. You've already pulled the rug out from under them. Okay, so I think that what was your intro? That it's controversial, right? So if you could somehow take that term controversial and end on it, so even though the Electoral College is going to continue to be controversial, there is a way to end the controversy. Something like that. Pick a word, and that's how you land it. Let's have the next group, you guys. And if this is distracting for me to be flowing, please tell me. Just don't look at me, because I'm just trying to make sure people see how the flow is unfolding here. Okay, what's your topic area, by the way?
Will women ever become president?
Women, all right. Yeah, I like this one.
Over a century ago, a little boy asked Grover Cleveland, "Will I ever become president? I want to become president." To which Grover Cleveland, the president at the time, responded, "Good luck, kid." That little boy grew up to be none other than our president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now we are wondering if a little girl will ever grow up and take the highest position in the United States, President of the United States. Yes, we do believe that time will come, and this is not a matter of sex or feminism. This is a matter that will affect generations for years to come. Today we'll discuss how far they have come, where they already are, and the benefits of a female president and what that implies. In the past, women have already come so far, coming into the Senate and House as representatives for the nation. In the 1900s, women already earned the right to vote as suffragettes. Today, many leaders, including Angela Merkel, Hillary Clinton, and the CEO of Yahoo, Theresa May, and many more, have already become very high positions in the world. So many women and leaders have come close and are changing the nation as we speak. The benefits of a female president: you can get a new approach to life. You can inspire many women, as more than half of the population of the U.S. are female. And you can prevent sexism and inspire many young children to chase their dreams. In conclusion, we believe that there will be a female president in the future, and she will aspire to be the next president of the United States.
Great. All right. Okay, so you had all the elements in your intro. Good. The only thing that wasn't there was your ID, but that's okay. I'm not worried about that for this. I did get a little confused. Where did you draw the line between the past and the present? Is the Merkel, May, Hillary, is that the present? Okay, that's what I was thinking. And so one thing you want to do is to state your tags. So after you've given your roadmap up here, we believe yes for 3 reasons, past, present, future. Then you're going to say, taking a look at the past. So re-hit that word past, restate your tagline. Moving to the present, when we look at notable women who have already become presidents or the heads of countries. Finally, when we look to the future, let's look at the advantages. So restate your tags as you move. Now you'll notice I also physically moved, and this is one thing I was going to teach you all, but this is as good a time to do it as any. It is called the triangle. And we'll get into what do you do with your body and all that stuff in just a minute. But in terms of movement, the triangle essentially goes like this. This is where you start. 2, 3, 4, and 5 its conclusion. When you do your introduction, start in the middle. Then when you're moving, after you finish your roadmap right here, as you're moving into your first point, you take about 1.5 steps. Now I'm left-handed, so I always go to the left. If you're right-handed, you may want to go to the right. Doesn't matter which way you go, but take 1.5 steps. When we take a look at the past, it is clear that blah, 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 blah. Moving to the present, I take 1.5 steps and I move here. Then when I talk to the future, I take 1.5 steps again and move here. And finally, for my conclusion, I move back to the middle. That's the triangle. Again, goes back to Aristotle. This is not new news. But this helps both you and the audience know where the heck you are. And had we been able to teach you the triangle, I probably would have known that this was the present thing. So state your tags and try to use the movement. The thing we don't want to do is this. First off, I'm sure you have teachers who sit there and walk and talk. And this is what they do. They pace back and forth and they talk very deep thoughts that they're trying to share. And they never look at you and they're just bouncing back and forth like a shooting duck gallery. That's very, very bad. And you can tell them that. You can say, Mrs. Hayes said this is a very bad thing to do. The other thing is some people just meander. Why? Because you're trying to think up here and your little happy feet are doing a little happy dance down there. You have no idea what you're doing. Is this a little distracting for him to be wandering back and forth? This is even more distracting when I'm talking to the board and I'm reading my PowerPoint slides and I'm staring up here. Can you hear what I'm saying? Well, yeah, you can because I'm yelling, but people talk to the board all the time for the same reason they stare at their notes. They're scared. They think this will help them. It doesn't help you. It kills you. So don't get rid of the notes. Do not look at the board. Keep your eyes focused. The persuasion is eyeball to eyeball and ear to ear. That's the only thing that persuades. Let me talk quickly while we're on it about what you do with the rest of your body while you're here. And those of you who have been at this, you know exactly where I'm going with this. In terms of what you do, I've already taught you what to do with your feet, which is use the triangle to transition. Now in interp, it's different. You saw what they did in interp, right? You saw that they were sort of zitzing all over the place. You stand where you need to in interp in order to do the piece. But in original speaking, the triangle generally is what you want to do. You do not do the triangle in debate. In debate, you just stand there and you just argue. But let's start from the top. The first thing I want everybody to do is shut your eyes. I want you to put your arms down by your side. I want to drop your shoulders, and then I want you to push them back. And then I want you to feel the difference in your chest. You've just opened up your lungs. The number one problem people have in public speaking is they're scared. They walk up to the front, they're hunched over, we're used to doing this all day long. You don't have any air. And the first thing that comes out of your mouth is a squeak or a croak. It's terrible. And then your voice starts to waver because you can't get enough oxygen. I want you to at least get one good breath in you as you stand up and walk to the front. Drop shoulders back. Then, as you're walking up, this is called 1, 2, 3, go, by the way. 1 was stand up, drop shoulders. 2, as you're walking up, I want you to take a deep breath in. I want you to let it out. And I want you to remember to take another breath in again. Everybody shut your eyes and just do that. what you should feel is, again, with your arms down and back, you should be able to fill your lungs up and it relaxes you. If you are tense, your vocal cords are going to tense up, and again, you are going to squeak. Oxygen helps prevent that. So 2 is breathe. 3, you get up here to the front, and I want you to position your feet like this. I'm left-handed, or like that. I do not want you to do this. Why? Guys always do this. You sway. And you either sway in the shoulders, which is the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or you do the hoochie coochie. I don't care which it is. But if your feet are like this, or they planted, it's not going to help you. If you have one slightly in front, it's a little more difficult to sway. Now, I have seen people doing this, which is called the lunge, en garde. And then they do this one like that. So we really don't want to do the lunge either. We're just trying to get the feet to stand still. At the end of the day, you want to tell your feet, stand still and don't do anything till I tell you to do it, which is the triangle. Okay, so the 1, 2, 3, the third thing, when you get up here, you've got your feet positioned, I want you to smile. Why?
Because then it's like, because then it's almost like if you're a judge and you're looking at them, it's like, oh, they actually like enjoy this and they're interested.
That's it.
Can we smile if it's debate?
Sure.
But if you're not, it's like, oh, like they don't really care.
Here's why you smile. It looks like you're confident. And if you don't smile, you look like you're scared to death. The judge is very attuned to subconscious signals. If they think you're scared to death, you've already halfway lost the round. So if you smile, people who are scared to death don't smile, right? So if you smile, even if you are scared to death, you've thrown them off, at least for half an instant. Now, the thing that you need to keep in mind is that you don't have to smile through the whole thing. It's just as an introduction. Before you've actually opened your mouth, you're letting people know you're happy to be there. This is something that I call C3. Anybody who's been in the military knows what C2 is. Anybody know what C2 is? Okay, very common thing. C2 is a combination of C1, which is command, and command of the subject matter is what we are talking about. We are not talking about nuclear weapons. C2 is control, and that is controlling your body and your voice. That's what we're talking about right now. If you add those together, it equals C3, which is confidence. And at the end of the day, there was a great study that just came out from UPenn. Confidence is what wins the round. If you've got command of your subject matter, you got control of your body, you will be confident, and that's what subconsciously projects itself to the judge, who says, oh, you're the strongest speaker in the room. You may be the worst speaker in the room. Doesn't matter. The judge thinks you're the strongest because you're confident. So if we can build the confidence, we're in good shape. Okay, so let's get back to control, where we were. We talked about the 1, 2, 3, go. The next thing I want to talk about is hair. If you have long hair, I want you to have it pulled back off your face. I hate this. Why? Is it a little distracting? Yeah.
It's like, oh, like I'm so full.
It could be that, or it's very distracting. Do not wear long dangly earrings, guys or girls. Keep them studs. Why? Dangly earrings. This is like the cat watching the laser. The audience is like the cat. It's just watching anything it can to distract it. So no distraction. That means all the hair is off the face. None of you guys have mustaches yet. My favorite speech was a guy down at Clemson who somehow got his mustache into his mouth and sat there and talked like this the whole time. And he chewed on half of his mustache and spoke out of the other side of his mouth. So it goes for guys and gals together. You guys, if you have a beard, please keep it under control. Okay. The next thing, eye contact. You guys are good with eye contact. You know you're supposed to look people in the eyes. The reason you practice is because every single one of us has a way of accessing information. When I'm trying to think of something, I look back over there. Other people look down here. Other people look up there. It depends on how your brain, it's actually mapping where your brain is going to gather the information. When you're trying to think, I don't want you looking back over here. I don't want you looking at the floor. I want you looking at people. And if you don't feel comfortable looking at people, look at the people with glasses, because you can't see their eyes. Or if nobody has glasses, look right there. They think you're looking at them. I'm not looking at any single one of you right now, but you think I am looking at you. But I'm not. Yeah.
With glasses, is it distracting to keep fingers?
Oh, yeah. So if you've got slidey glasses, put sticky gum on them or something. Keep them up or take them off, one or the other. Actually, if you're really somebody who's afraid of looking at people and you wear glasses, just take your glasses off. This is a great way to give a speech. I can't see any of you, I can guarantee. I see blue, gray, and blue. That's all I see. So that's another little tactic you can play. But you're only going to know that by getting yourself videoed by your coach and then watching your behavior and having people feedback. So the eye contact is important. Keep a slow scan. Just because only one person in the room counts, who's the judge back there, you should still look at everybody. But it's not a fast scan. It's a slow conversational scan, and then you come back. And occasionally you look at the judge. Don't stare at the judge. That makes them really uncomfortable. Okay, next thing is facial expression. Do not be afraid to use your eyebrows and the smiling. This is how we gauge if you're telling the truth. If you've got a really exciting speech, but your face is completely stone cold, what does that say? I'm lying. Do you believe the excitement in my voice? Or do you believe the stone cold flat face that I have here? You got it. These have to be consistent. The vocal tone and your facial gestures have to be there. The problem is when people get scared, they freeze. So again, practice is how you're going to overcome this. Let's move down to what we do with gestures. On gestures, there is a box, and the box goes from here to here, about like that. You do not want your hands in the box. Go big or go home. Do not have just one hand doing all the work. This is why I want you to get rid of notes. If you have notes, this hand's doing nothing. Or it's like this and you're staring at them. I want you to get rid of the notes and make both hands do their job. Try different gestures. Palms up, palms down. Everybody has a favorite gesture. Some people like this. Some people emphasize every single word with a gesture. You don't want to be doing this. Why?
Because then the words that need emphasis don't actually get emphasized.
That's true, and it's distracting at the end of the day. Now I'm going to be more interested in watching what you're doing with your hands. So practice with your hands. Try, if you're going to count like this so I can see them. Does this help you? How many fingers do I have up? You have no idea. Right. It's hiding. Don't let your hands touch each other. That is the number one. Other than the box, do not let your hands touch each other. Yeah.
So, like, putting your hands up front like this. Really
Don't let them touch each other. Keep them above the waist. Guys, if you stick your hands in your pockets, which occasionally you can, make sure you have nothing in your pockets. Nothing more interesting than jingle bells, playing with the keys and the coins and everything else that's down there. A little happy dance in the pants. We're all like, what's going on? Keep your hands out of your pants pockets to the extent that you can. When you're not using your hands, you put them right down by your sides exactly as I'm doing right now. You don't do this. This is a defensive gesture. The box is defensive. Girls tend to do this, guys tend to do that. You're defending yourself. I don't want it there. I want your hands here because that means you're confident. Only confident speakers can stand up with their hands by their sides. Final thing, get your hands up above your waist. If you're doing this, these are called wrist twists. These are premature gestures. You're thinking of gesturing, but you haven't quite gotten to it. This is very distracting. So get them up or don't use them at all. Yeah.
So you're not supposed to, like, as you said before, like when it's distracting when you like walk around while you're talking. So you should stay in one place.
No, you do the triangle. It's purposeful movement. The whole mantra here is when you move for a reason. I'm moving to transition you into the first point. And that's helping you understand I've moved into the first point, and then I'm moving to the second point. I am moving, but very purposefully. I know exactly where I'm going when. You've got to practice the triangle, though, because if you don't, you'll never pull it off. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, any other questions on that? And we've talked about the feet and how to position those and how to use the purposeful gesture. So that's the command and control. The only other thing on control is what you do with your voice. It's called the 5 Ps: pace, pause, pitch, power, and passion. The voice, if somebody is monotone, that means they don't have a conversational tone of voice. Everybody say your name, shut your eyes, and say, hi, my name is blah, 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 and I go to blank, blank, blank school. Just say it, everybody out loud now, shut your eyes, and just do it. Beautiful. Did you hear what your voice was doing? Hi, my name is da-da-da. I'm going to da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, I want you to do it monotone. Hi, my name is Sue Hayes. I go to blah, 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 whatever it is. No inflection. Isn't that boring? 5 P's. Pace. I'll write them up here. So this is what we can do with our voice. This is the voice box. You've got pace. So you don't want to go too fast. But the key to not going too fast is to pause. You need to be able, people listen after a pause. Think about Martin Luther King. He would speak very quickly and then he'd stop. You heard every single word that he said, the next sentence. Blah, 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 blah. I have a dream. He must have said that 23 times. We remember I have a dream. We don't remember any of the rest of the speech, but the pausing is key to showing that you have command and control, and that also helps slow down the pace. So I live up in New York, and I can talk very, very fast. Policy debaters, 400 words a minute. That's what I'm used to talking and listening to. But if you pause, I can still understand what you're talking about. So keep in mind, pace and pause work together. The next thing we were just talking about, which is pitch. You want it to be conversational, up and down. And there is one piece here I do have to talk about, which I hope none of you are guilty of, which is uptalk. Uptalk is where at every comma in a sentence, you go up. My name is Sue Hayes. I teach at Wharton, and I like to do public speaking. And you're saying, do you really? You sound like you don't know what you're talking about. You don't sound like you have it under control, lady. So uptalk is something that is very common right now. We especially tend to do it after somebody has asked us a question, because a question you're supposed to go up at the end. You know, what's your name? Name. And then you say, my name is Sue Hayes. And you go, oh, I don't think you know what your name is. So we mimic uptalk. You're not going to have a Q&A except in debate. And debate, we're not really looking at this that much anyway. But be cognizant of uptalk. And the way you're going to pick this out, coaches, is by videoing them. And you will hear it. And you need to tamp it down. It's a mimicking behavior. If your friends are doing it, you're going to do it. So you need to get your friends to stop doing it, is the bottom line. Then the next thing we talk about is power, which is also projection of power. And projection is using your diaphragm to speak loudly enough that people can hear you. Try to make sure the last person in the row can hear what you're saying. People who talk like this aren't going to win the round. Why? Because I sound like I don't know what I'm doing, I'm scared to death. And then the final thing you've got to have is the passion. And that passion is when you punch words. You emphasize certain things. You guys did that as you were saying your names. I could hear you. Hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. Boom. So that passion is the punch that you have in there. Okay, so I've gotten 2,500 years of public speaking all into one. These are the variables you've got on the voice side to play with. And we've talked about the one area. The one thing that I haven't talked about are ums, uhs. Anybody know what the top non-fluencies are? I just gave you and That's an easy one. Okay, and is a good one. And so. You know, right? Like. And another one are adverbs. Really. Anything that ends with an ly. These are fillers. They are meant to buy you time to think about the next thing you're going to say. And it is okay to have a few ums and uhs, but at the point that it becomes distracting, which means every other word is an or you're going to lose the round. How do you get rid of ums and uhs? You become aware of them. So again, watch the video. Your coach should be doing a tick mark every time you say an and you can see their hand going down every time you do an or a like or a you know. My generation says you know. That's what we were brought up with. I don't tend to hear you knows. I hear every single like, because that's what you guys do, and I hate like. So be aware that if you say like a lot, you're going to get dinged for that. But again, just being aware that you do it by watching the video is going to make a difference. You'll start self-monitoring. Okay, we have one more speech to give. If you thought you were going to get off the hook, you were wrong. So why don't we get the last speech up here, and then we're going to move into debate. So we have enough time to do some debate stuff. I've just made it so much harder for you. But now you have the secret Rosetta Stone. So I'll just stand here. Actually, I'll flow it over here so I don't distract you. Okay.
The latest impeachment has
after Trump and many people want to bring him out of office. My dad has lately talked to me about how people are going to pull Trump out. My 3 reasons that the impeachment are going to affect the next election are people won't take elections seriously anymore. Other presidents might think that it's okay to be lazy and act the way Trump did for his 3 years in office. But other presidents can also learn from what Trump did, enhance impeachment, and do the opposite, and he won't be impeached.
Okay.
People won't take elections as seriously because they know that people will always be impeached if Trump gets impeached right now. So they could always wait for Trump to get pulled out, or they could just, have another person as president, and then if people don't like him, he could always get pulled out, so it could go on forever. Other presidents might think it's okay to be lazy and act the way Trump did. People won't take stuff as seriously anymore when they're in office because they will lay back and not do work as hard. And other presidents can learn from what Trump did and what impeached him and do the opposite, so people can work harder and there'll be harder elections, and they will do the opposite, so people won't want to impeach them.
Okay.
So the latest impeachment has affected people, and that's why the impeachment will affect the next election.
Okay, good job. All right, well, I'm not going to spend much more time on this, but you did have 3 points. You had a roadmap, that was good. I think the intro and conclusion could have been a little bit stronger. You know, the tie-in, that's where you had struggled. So here's my recommendation. When you do impromptu, that you practice out loud. Well, in impromptu, you can't practice out loud, but when you practice in school, try to get your intro and your conclusion down. Say those out loud, at least that one sentence, as much as you can. Now, you can't do it in the actual impromptu round because you're sitting in the room and the judge is right there. That would not work. But you can have had enough practice up to that point where you remember, here's how I want to start it and here's how I'm going to end it. Okay? We're going to turn, if anybody needs to run the restroom, you can do it now. You have 2 minutes. That's fast restroom activity, and I'm going to set debate up at this point. We're going to stay in the tables. Explain how it works. You guys are going to be affirmative today, two affirmative teams. You guys are going to be neg. So when we get to the actual workshop piece, you're going to be looking for arguments for that. Now, I have 2 coaches who are going to serve as the debaters. Give me just a minute to hand out this. You guys have received this material, by the way, but give me 1 second to split it between affirmative and neg. I just got to find the page number. Pro ends at page 53. Okay. So affirmative is this side. You guys are affirmative, right? I'm going to actually take this. So that's the evidence packet for affirmative. Better yet, you will be no excuses. And then this is negative. So here's the negative packet of evidence. And we're going to use it in a few minutes. You don't need it right now. I just wanted to hand it out so I didn't forget about it. Okay. How many of you have ever debated before? Anybody done debate? Okay, great. Then you're going to be sort of the team captains. Here's how debate works. This is public forum, also known as PUF. And the first thing you need to do is take out a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, and we're going to fold it. I'm going to teach you how to fold it. So take out a piece of paper, and you're going to fold it this way. 1, and then you're going to fold it in thirds and thirds. So you end up with 6 channels. Now, in the actual debate, for you guys, if you write big, I'd recommend you go get an art pad, like something like this, and do the same thing. Being an adult, I write really, really small, so I can fit on this piece of paper. You might not be able to. Just get a piece of paper big enough for what you're doing. But on that piece of paper, here's what I want you to write in the first column. 1AC stands for First Affirmative Constructive. And this is 4 minutes long. A constructive means you are building. This is what you are going to create. And this is a case that you have written in advance. How many points are you going to have? 3. Thank you. And these are called contentions. You have 3 contentions. The packet of evidence I've just handed out to the affirmatives and then to the negatives. You can go through that and quickly pick out, there are probably 70 arguments in each packet. You only have to pick 3, right? But you better pick 3 good ones. So before you even look at the evidence, I would use your brain. So the topic as it reads is resolved. Debate topics always are resolved. The U.S. ought is going to be a key word, because that has a moral imperative to, replace the Electoral College with direct popular vote. On the affirmative, you have to support the resolved. You may not come up with another way of doing it. You must advocate for direct popular vote. On the negative, you do not necessarily have to support the Electoral College. All you have to do is to dispute the affirmative's direct popular vote. However, you could also support the Electoral College. The negative has more strategies available to it. But on the affirmative, you've got to do the topic. Okay, ought to replace with direct popular vote. So I want you, in your groups, you're going to come up with 3 reasons why. And then I want you to pick out at least one piece of evidence to support each of these points. The more evidence you have, the longer you go. Yep. First, affirmative constructive. Now, in public forum, they also call this pro, but I'm giving you policy debate terms. It's affirmative. You are advocating a change in the status quo. Affirmative is always advocating a change. And that's why affirmative generally has the first and last stand on the floor, because it's the more difficult position. All right, so first 1AC. And then on the next column, I want you to write 1NC and a 4. This is also a 4-minute speech. First, negative constructive. Again, this is a 4-minute speech you've written out in advance. And again, you're going to come up with 3 reasons. Since you wrote out in advance, are you responding to the affirmative?
No.
You haven't heard their case yet. You wrote this 5 days ago, or hopefully more than that. But this is your position as to why the Electoral College should not be replaced with direct popular vote. Okay? Now, there is a 3-minute cross-X which happens between these 2 people after they've both read their 4-minute speeches. And you can read them, although obviously the better speakers don't read it word for word. But these 2 will ask each other questions. The general protocol is, because this person just finished speaking, first affirmative gets the first question on the floor. Let me explain cross-X. This is where the debates are won and lost, generally. Weak speakers will end up answering all questions. The one who is asking questions is the one who's in control. The power goes with the questioner. So you do not want to get cornered by some aggressive debater just pummeling you with questions. You say, hold on, I have a question. And they're supposed to shut up and let you ask. Do not fall into the trap of being always the one answering questions. You will lose the round. And I usually, as a debate coach, can figure out who's won or lost after the first cross-X. I'll know which team is stronger. And at the end of the day, that's what the judges are voting on, is who's the stronger team. It doesn't matter how many wonderful arguments you had. If you didn't do a good job of presenting it, you're going to lose. Okay, so there's a 3-minute cross-X. The next column I want, and I don't flow that. by the way. That's why there's no column for that. I actually just write it on the back of a piece of paper. But anything that is said in cross-X is not part of the flow. This is called a flow. And the flow is how a judge weighs at the end of the round who won or who lost. And they judge it based on who won the most arguments. Cross-X, there are no arguments being presented. And when you're in cross-X, you don't sit there and start trying to make arguments because I'm not flowing them. If I don't flow it, you're not going to get the credit for it. Too bad. Save your argumentation for the constructives. That's where they fall. So don't give away the goods in cross-X. Answer the question and then get your question in. What you're trying to do in cross-X is trap them. These are not easy softball questions. Occasionally you get people saying, oh, well, could you repeat your first contention? I didn't get it. Well, now you look like a dork because you didn't catch the first contention. But, okay, sometimes you got to ask that question. Maybe the person was speaking incoherently and you didn't get it. Generally, cross-X questions are supposed to be setups. You know the answer to the question. You want to see if they know the answer to the question. Because you have a piece of evidence that you're going to read here. It's going to take them out. Are you going to tell them that piece of evidence in cross-X? If you tell them there, what are they going to do? They're going to respond to it and take it out before you even get to bring it up in this speech here. So it never gets on the flow. You lost your best argument in cross-X. Well, that was not a good strategy. Anyway, going on, the next column is second affirmative constructive. So this is the second person. This person has one responsibility only, and that is to respond to what the negative case was in the order that the negative presented it. Flows are how you win and lose a debate. If you do a good job of taking notes, you will probably win the debate. A lot of novice debaters, this is the order in which the negative presented it, and the first thing they talk about is 3, and then they talk about 1, and then they go back to 2, and then they go to 3, and then they maybe add in a fourth argument. And the judge is going, where are you going? I have no idea what you're talking about. And the judges don't want to work that hard. If you're not organized, they're going to just say, oh, this is nice. They put down their pen. The moment you see a judge put down the pen, you better assume that you have messed up. Because if they're not taking notes, they're not going to be able to determine who won or lost the argument. So make sure you do not do this, wherever I put this thing. Make sure that you go in the order of the negative case. Do not fall into the trap of repeating any of this. You don't need to. Why? Why do we not need to reiterate the first affirmative? Right? And has anybody attacked it yet? No, nobody's attacked it. So what's the point? A lot of baby debaters get up there and they reread the first affirmative constructive. Again, really good way to lose the debate. How do I, as a judge this? If you respond to this, to each one of these arguments, they're still in play. If you fail to respond to the second argument, this is what I do. It's called a drop. You drop that argument. Negative has just won that argument. Okay, so I got 6 total arguments. Neg's already won 1 of them. And we're only 3 speeches into this. This is easy. If you drop the second argument, ooh, better yet, now you're going to lose the debate. Okay, so you need to keep track of what these guys say, and then you need to respond to it in order with evidence so that I know that you've answered it. Does that make sense? And you do not need to repeat the first affirmative because nobody's talked about it yet. Okay, so what do you think this one's going to be?
2NC.
Thank you. And these are also all 4-minute speeches. What's the 2NC need to do? What's still sitting on the flow, steaming, hasn't been talked about yet? Thank you. Exactly. So all of this stuff comes over here, and they are to respond to that. But this speech is actually one of the more difficult ones because not only does this person have to respond to 1AC, which hasn't been touched, also has to respond to the arguments that have just been placed against your case. Okay? So here's the neg, and here's the AF case. The first thing 2NC has to do is address the AF case. Second thing is he has to go back, or she has to go back and pick up and answer any of this stuff here. Again, if you fail to answer that, you lose it. You lose that argument. And you cannot redeem yourself if the judge is paying attention. Now, if you've got a mommy judge who isn't paying attention, well, you know, redemption is free. But in this instance, you want to make sure you pick it up. This is 4-minute speech to cover essentially 12 minutes worth of content. And that doesn't mean you speak really fast. It means you speak smart. You make sure that you're covering the top line tags. And again, when you're flowing, do you have room to write out verbs and whole long sentences? One word is about all you got. You need to make sure that you capture each one of those and respond to it. Now, after these guys are done, again, you have a 3-minute cross-ex between these two. And again, I, as a judge, am trying to figure out who's the more powerful debater. Who's controlling this versus who is being the victim, the responsive person. Okay, the next thing you do is the first affirmative rebuttal, which is a 2-minute speech. And what's this first affirmative guy got to do, or girl have to do? What's sitting out there that's really got to be answered?
Like the next answer is down there.
Actually, they need to recover their case. The first thing affirmative wants to do, because this was her or his speech here, and this guy's attacked it, go back and defend your case. So always defend your own, in the rebuttals, you want to make sure you defend your affirmative. Then come back down and answer that. But again, you only have 2 minutes now. 2 minutes to cover 16 minutes worth of attacking. You really got to crystallize. You got to hone in on the things that are going to really make a difference. The next person is going to be first negative rebuttal, and that person is going to probably take a holistic view. Again, 2 minutes for this person. At this point, probably the most fun in the entire thing is called the Grand Crossfire. I can't write here. Grand Crossfire. And this is where all 4 of you get to ask questions. And it's generally, the judges hate it because it's total chaos, but the kids love it. But again, I'm quickly figuring out who's the more dominant debaters. That's what Grand Crossfire is meant for. The final 2 speeches on the floor, again, that was 3 minutes. These are 2 minutes, is the second affirmative rebuttal and the second negative rebuttal. And the whole point here is what we call crystallize. And it's voters. Crystallizing means you hone in on, out of all the arguments on the flow, at this point you probably have a good 20 arguments out there, pick the ones that you're winning and tell the judge why you should win the round. Judge, they dropped 3 of our main contentions. They never answered this. They dropped 2 arguments on the affirmative case, and then they dropped our response on the neg case. We should win on predominance. Maybe it's some evidence you have that it clearly dominates over that. But the voters are, you pick the top 3 reasons why you should win the round. Okay? That's essentially what they're doing in the last. So with that being said, does this give you enough context for how a debate is flowed? We're going to now debate. I want you guys to get all together, pick 3 arguments and 1 person to get up and speak, and then also pick a second affirmative. You guys do the same, first negative and second negative, and we're going to get through as much of the debate as we can. And the coaches have the evidence, so they can help you out.
You guys have some of that already?
Yeah. What are the ones on the top? So it's not just our green.
We are pro.
Does someone want to write this down?
Well, let's share what you have already.
Yeah, everybody just, we only have time for 1 team. You get suckered into everything.
He volunteered. Yeah.
Ed, you should be paying attention. First, never to give a speech. You have to be done here in 10 minutes. Everybody sit down. I'm going to need to miss Bossy Can. Okay, first of affirmative, I'm gonna flow it while he's speaking it, so go ahead and.
The U.S. have to replace the electoral college because it's not fair. In Wyoming, each elector represents 167 votes compared to California, where 600,000 votes per elector. The electoral college is formed because it was supposed to protect slavery from the North. And now it lets losers like Trump be president. Many elections have also been lost because of the first reason. If it was exactly 160,000 people per one elector, the president who lost would have won, and it's not fair.
Okay.
This is why the electoral college should be abolished.
Okay, could you repeat your three arguments, because I didn't catch them.
In Wyoming, each elector represents 167 votes compared to
What, give me a tag, I need a two, what's your first point? Just one or two words.
The electors aren't equal.
Not equal, okay, what's the next one?
It was used to protect slavery.
Slavery, okay. And what's the third one?
Elections have been lost.
Lost, okay, cool. So, very key, you need to say, I have three contentions. One, it's not equal to, it promotes slavery. Three, it's not fair. But give me one word, because I as a coach or as a judge don't have time to write down a full sentence. And I get lost. And if I get lost, you get lost. So, okay, let's have first name. Get up here. First act, you need to stand to one side because you're going to have a cross-sex.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Direct voting is bad because first of all, because smaller states have less, because if you have direct voting in place, smaller states do not have less weight and punch when you're doing power. With more people, considering that different states have different populations, like let's say for example New York having a lot more people than Alaska, and direct voting would let different people who live in different places have less of a weight for their issues. Second would be recount nightmare. So there's more than 50 million people in the U.S. and that with more people in play, that would kind of be really bad for recounts and such and such. And then third would be that the founders of the U.S. give our argument credibility. Originally, the founders wanted the electoral college in place so that, to go back to my first point, that the smaller states would get more power and such, so we could keep the states all equal.
Okay, now we're going to cross-sex. Where did my speaker go? And I know you need to stand up here. I'm going to teach you guys how to do cross-sex. Both? No. I need both first act and first next. Okay. Here's how you do cross-sex. You do not look at each other. You only look at the judge. The only person who matters here is the judge. Are you ever going to persuade him to change his mind?
No.
Right. Ignore him. So always look this way. Novice debaters do this. Little beep, 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 going back. And the judge is going, I can't hear you. And so don't do that. And that is a sure sign that you're a novice. Look out at the judge. Number two, you start with the first question. Ask a question, then you respond. Try to keep answers concise. We're going to just do a couple questions, but ask them a question.
Why was the electoral college formed?
Okay, answer.
So that it could allow different states who have more population than the other to be more similar in power, so that so that certain numbers of states who have higher populations can't have power over smaller states when it comes to certain issues.
Okay, now you next said, now I have a question for you.
Now, my question for you is that what was your kind of reasoning behind the electoral being made to protect slavery?
It was because that the North used to have more power than the South.
Okay, now ask him another question.
I have a question. Isn't what you were saying about how a lot of people were living in New York and less people were living in Alaska? That's why we should use a direct popular vote, because it does the exact number of people.
What's your question?
So
you have to, don't make an argument. That was an argument. So you need to turn it into a question. It's not just by sticking a question mark at the end. What are you trying to ask him? Maybe the question is, isn't it more fair that New York should get more power? Maybe that's the way you want to ask it.
Isn't it more fair that New York has more power than Alaska because they have more people?
Well, then, when certain laws and things are passed that would benefit New York more than Alaska, maybe maybe like certain geographic things, or, I don't know, it really depends on the law, then it wouldn't be that fair for people in Alaska.
Okay, and last question, you get last question, and then we're gonna call it quits. I'm gonna play the one last thing.
So you said in your opening that, you said that, that it's, the electoral is not fair because the electoral is not fair because of because they're placing,
It's not equal.
because it shows not equal.
So what's your question?
It shows that the electoral is not fair because they're placing the power of many people into one person or a group of people.
And you're in, and then you say, what's your question?
What's your question?
Okay. Yeah.
Because it wasn't clear.
So like, because you're placing the 50 million people in the United States, and you're kind of grouping them into a smaller group of, let's say, 300 people who cast in their votes. And so that wouldn't be really fair to all the 50 million people out there in the U.S.
I'm still a little confused. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm kind of dying here.
Okay, good job, guys.
Well, we didn't have it to do.
All right, so we're gonna play one last video. Okay, you guys can sit down. Here's a couple things to remember in the process. If somebody asks a question, my darlings, I can't talk over you. I can, but you really don't want me to do that. Make sure you ask the question. Do not make arguments because you lose them. The judge won't flow them. Number two, keep your answers concise. The longer the question, the shorter your answer should be. Number three, make sure your questions are concise and make sense. If you don't have a question, then just hand it back to them. Okay, this hopefully gets you enough going that you can go home and practice debate. It's lots of fun. I wanted to end with a poetry interp because it is a fun thing to do. And let's see if I can just turn on the TV. Where did here it goes. Because I think you'll enjoy this one. Some of you have seen it before.
Oh my god!
All right, can somebody turn the light off over there, please? Sorry, he'll start this way.
Ladies and gentlemen, your 2010 state champion in poetry reading from Oakland, Eric Cicada.
I can't get the volume up any higher, I don't think. Here you go.
I love cake. I can't be any clearer than that. I love cake. I could eat every cake in New York City. I can't even go to bakeries anymore. Cause I'll eat all the cake. I'll say, where's the cake? I love cake. Give me some cake.
Notice how he's holding the book. He's not reading from it, but he's got it.
Cake. We know that you rarely have enough money to buy our cake, so you can't come in here because you can't afford the cake. You love the cake. So get out of here. You cannot have any of the cake. You don't have the money to buy any of our cake.
Good use of pause. See how I'm pausing? You're paying attention to it.
I want
This is poetry.
I want your cake. Give me all of your cake. I love cake.
Now see how this is the intro.
An overweight man can be difficult. However, as these poets show us, if we just shift our perspectives and enjoy the little things about being big, we can appreciate ourselves no matter what our shape. Cake by Todd Colby and This Is Not Glandular by Dan O'Neill.
Okay. Titles and authors.
I don't use excuses. these sandwiches replace bedtime stories. As I clean my plate every time, because it was all I could do to say, I love you too. I mean, I never knew my dad. And Rick was never a hands-on stepfather, unless you account for less than occasional slap upside the head. So, food gave me surrogate fathers. Colonel Sanders and Chef Boyardee became my models for manhood, which explains my affinity for weird hats. I chose this body because of 7th grade PE. Because if just one fat guy is confident in changing clothes, it makes others more confident. Because dodgeball is a crappy sport, so who cares if I get knocked out first? Because running the mile is torture. And so are the jokes if the fat guy can't finish it. I chose this body because other people not liking my body is not a good enough reason for me to change it. So to the bullies, the lunch ladies, to the women who never gave me a chance, and the football coaches who barraged me with insults, to the jerks and the jocks, and the doctor who joked when I stepped on the scale, to Rick and the Colonel, and anyone who's ever used F-A-T as an insult, you can all do what I spent decades of my life doing. You can eat it. Because I love pies. I love hamburgers and french fries and lobster and deep fried Twinkies. I love me some rice-a-roni and berry steak, microwave burritos, cooler ranch Doritos, and ice cream. The kind that you push that has Red Flintstone on it. I love cake. I love everything about who I am and the life I get to live. No, this is not glandular. It's just fact. And for the first time in my life, I'm proud of it.
So notice how he took 2 poems and he chopped the first one into 2 chunks. He starts with I Love Cake, then he did his intro, then he has a different poem, which is what I call bittersweet. Those are often the strongest. Hold on, let me just stop this. We can sit here and watch these things all day, they're great, but, so bittersweet is often a very good way to do it. It's not, there's a lot of humor, but then there's some pain in there as well. And then he ends up with a conclusion, go back to I Like Cake. But it resonates with people really well, and I never forgot this one. And there've been lots and lots, but that's something you can do with poetry or prose, so think about it. Anyway, yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if this is like extremely related, but I didn't know the debate was gonna end. So I know at the beginning when you said losers like Trump, like I was gonna hammer him for being biased and stuff. But like I wanted to save that for later. So
We should have used this one as a
Well,
contention.
I mean, that's the wonderful thing about debate, is each round you get to replay it and do it a little different each time. But
It said that,
Filthy Democrat.
we lost the debate.
You did not lose
No,
the
we
debate.
didn't.
We only had 2
Both sides.
constructors, can't win or lose. So any questions, you guys? Are you excited?
yeah, I kind of want to do cake.
I might do
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you guys should practice debate. Every week I would have like a debate. They don't take that long, 45 minutes. So maybe
Yeah,
yeah.
I want to get better. I'm so excited.
Thank you very much. We'll see you.
Yeah, we can like practice.
Come on.
Thank you very much.
Quick answer.